we got to talk about it. This is a conversation, and I have to throw a lifeline to the Democratic Party because they just voted a 10th time. And I repeat, the Senate 10th time to, push the keep the government open or to open the government with a clean resolution bill. And for the 10th time, the Democratic Party did not participate in the voting. So when we have these conversations and have these conversations and they're playing the blame game, the American people are not stupid. The American people are smart. And, we can actually figure it out because if they continue to vote on opening up to push a clean resolution bill, okay, to November, and then they can actually negotiate, that's common sense. That makes perfectly good sense to the average individual. But for the to hear the talking points and to blame it on the Republicans and play the blame game, I mean, come on, American people are caught in the crosshairs because there's no way that the government should be shut down under any circumstances. And both sides, depending on who's in office, basically says that. And now they want to blame Trump for everything. And Trump is basically on a world tour, doing things that, prior presidents couldn't even accomplish. Okay, there's peace in the Middle East. There's peace in the Middle East. And I say this because, we don't know what Hamas is going to do. We don't know what the future is, but they did come together and agree to shut it down. And here in America, we can't even agree to have the government open. So a house divided will not stand. And these things are going to, affect us and reflect the future. And I just want to conversate today and understand which side are you on? Okay, are you on the right side of history or are you on the wrong side of history? And these things are, going to play out, and our children's are going to see exactly what's going on. It is what it is. Okay, and this is LA. Okay, this is Los Angeles, California, and the government shut down 16. So today they vote time, and the Democrats decided not to open. And I can't see it either way. You don't know, I'm a nonpartisan independent. I'm not a scribe. Okay, or a see, and I'm not a, Republican Pharisee. I'm a nonpartisan independent, and I ambassador. And it is what it is. And like I said, we're having a conversation today. And I really don't topic of discussion. It's not a reaction. I don't to play. I just wanted to get with the people. So somebody put into the comments that they run your question, and if it's a question, I will do the best of my to answer the question. But as an American citizen who's sitting back, watching the lies, watching, individuals who's supposed to be for the people not be supportive. It is what it is. And I'm flabbergasted. I sit back and I watch our officials lie through their teeth. No disrespect to Hakeem Jeffries, the minority speaker. I watched him be forced to prosecute Trump for the impeachment, knowing to have anything to get him impeached. But since put some money up, since finance the impeachment efforts, so and stole the money. Tom Stroyer, he's the individual who put up the impeachment money, and now he's in the state of California doing commercials about yes on Prop 50 and take it to Donald Trump. Donald Trump nothing to do with Proposition 50. I'm in sunny California. I'm in Los Angeles, California. Yesterday was a rainy. The sun is out today. It's a beautiful day today. Tom Strayer or Tom Stroyer
could be corrected. He's not.
He's a major Democratic donor who has an issue with
And he has
an ad, and that's being played in California.
Do you want to take it to Trump? Do you want to
Get to Trump, and when the
did? He's
paid for and sponsored by himself. Okay. Then I seen another commercial, and I'm talking about Prop 50, and I'll get into the comments.
It's an individual
Who look like they're depressed and they're mad and they're angry. They're in a
watching the television. The house is
and they throwing things at the TV.
Talking about Trump's big beautiful bill and all of that, and then it comes and says,
if you want to take it to Trump, vote
Prop 50. Proposition
He has nothing to do
with President Trump. Proposition 50 has everything to do with the
California who want to repeal
independent body who
gerrymandering or draws the lines for
the seats in the House to basically not be an independent body,
hand the fortress over
to the extremists. And this
Booker, what Hakeem Jeffries says.
But it'll hit
Different if I said MAGA.
An extremist is an extremist, just like, there's no lesser of two evils. Evil is evil. It is what it is. And I promise that I'll be in the comments, and I'm jumping in the comments right now. Okay, let me see here. So you're okay with what Trump is doing. I'm okay with peace in the Middle East. I'm okay with the big, beautiful bill, because in terms of I've been having, and I'm going to do a video on it, individuals who are working class and who are doing their taxes, they're learning that those tax cuts went to the working class. If you're under $109,000, you saw a significant, tax reduction in your taxes. Okay. I'm down with what Trump is doing in terms of making America safe, because if you are an individual who's going around the world and peace in the Middle East and all of that, at least the country that you represent, there has to be some form of peace. And I don't have no problem with the National Guard. I don't have no problem with the federal troops. I don't have no problem with what they're doing with illegal immigration, because here in America, and as a black man in his 50s, okay, I lived in LA where, the gang injunctions, they had crash units, they could just stop you and frisk you without even no probable cause or anything like that. Hillary Clinton said that we were super predators and need to be brought to heel. They put the hammer on us, locked up our leaders, locked up the, ambassadors in the community, did so many things to us. So all I'm saying is, if you want to live in this country, abide by the rules. Because if I'm to get pulled over, I know my driver's license number by heart. I know my social security number by heart. It is what it is. So, and the Constitution talks about citizens' rights. So when you use the Constitution, you have to be a legal citizen to have protective rights under the Constitution. But a lot of individuals don't really understand that. So it's not the fact that I'm down with what Trump is doing. I'm down with America being the greatest nation in the world, because this is a nation that my ancestors built on free labor, and they still have not addressed or settled with the descendants of those individuals who built this country on free labor. You talking about a governor in Gavin Newsom who vetoed 6 reparations bills recently. The state legislator, pretty much voted for the reparations, and they told the state legislature, the state assembly, if you put, Gavin Newsom said, if you put that bill on my desk, I'm going to veto it. So instead of putting it on his desk and allowing him to veto it, to throw him under the bus, they basically took it and basically said, oh, we're just, we didn't, we're not going to put it on the governor's desk. And then the governor did what they would call, an apology. Okay. If anything was not owed to us, then what is the apology for? If anything is not owed to us, then, what is the purpose of funding studies? Okay. Think about that. And now I understand why they shut it down, because the funds that was earmarked for those reparations payout in the state of California are being used to push an agenda to take the people's power away and to hand the gerrymandering maps and to hand the keys to the safe to a handful of extremists. And it will hit different if I said MAGA extremists, but these are Democratic extremists. So basically, we have a special election coming up in the next month, and they're spending millions upon millions of dollars. They even got Barack Hussein Obama on record saying that, in a response to what Trump is doing, listen, this is going to be a snowfall effect that the Democrats will never understand. Okay. And one thing that I do know is that as a nonpartisan independent, I have to check in with my God. My morals, what I believe is more important than me and how I feel. And to see individuals caught in the crosshairs, to see individuals, black individuals, Latinos, somehow, some way just align themselves with a party of slavery, align themselves with the party of Jim Crow, align themselves with the party of the KKK, align themselves with the party of mass incarceration, align themselves with the party of welfare, and I could go on and on and on and on. So I'm giving you a lifeline. There's nothing wrong with being single, okay? And I'm using relationships from a metaphoric perspective because there's nothing wrong with being single. If you continue to be in an abusive relationships and relationships that are not healthy, and somehow, some way you continue to find yourself in a compromising position by, not being alone, there's going to come a day and time where you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to be single and I'm going to focus on myself, my disposition, and my community. And this is the lifeline that I'm sharing with you right now politically, because as a former Democrat who is a nonpartisan independent who understands that the Bible is a book of politics that contains religion, understanding that the Pharisees, are the conservative Republicans and the scribes and the Sadducees are the Democrats, because at least Jesus associated himself with the Pharisees, but he had no dealings with the scribes. Think about that. So it is what it is. And I'm in the comments. I'm in LA, Los Angeles, California. And somebody put, yeah, Hakeem Jeffries is terrible. Makes Obama look like an even better speaker. Listen, Obama, these guys, we think that they're something special. We think that they're something special. We think that they're, stand up individuals. But these are literally, and I say this, being honest, these guys are nothing but high-priced slaves. And when I say high-priced slaves, meaning there's individuals that they answer to. Cory Booker cannot tell the truth because there's individuals that control him. Okay. And if he speaks out of context and if he goes against the code or if he breaks the oath, he will find himself in a compromising position. The same as Barack Obama. This is why he's not going anywhere, because if Obama did not put his what I would say, his 2 cents in any of the things that's going on and just move on and just be a former president, then it would have been over a long time ago. But since it's crashing, since the Democratic Party is crashing out, now Obama got to come out and put his 2 cents in because, he did everything for everybody but his own people, and come to realize it, the black people are not his people. We got behind him, 2 times. We stood behind him. We voted for him. And what did we get out of the deal? And I'm speaking from a working class individual who happens to be a black man. What do we ever get out of giving our vote to the Democratic Party? Nothing. Because we see in their true colors right now. They had a 10th vote today to open the government, to pass a clear resolution a clean bill so they can actually open the government and have these conversations. But the Democrats did not support it. And then they'll go on record and say, let's negotiate, let's have a conversation. How is anybody going to negotiate and have a conversation if the government is closed? And then if you go on record and say that, then you are speaking to ignorant, dumb, people. Okay. Because I think they think we're all stupid, or they're relying on the lowest of the lowest vibrations to pretty much peddle this madness, because they go on all the liberal news outlets and give these individuals talking points to make it seem as though that the Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong. So typically, and I'm gonna say every time that there's who's ever in power has the power and the ability, to control. They have the power and the ability to redraw state lines. And I'm on Prop 50 right now. So why is it that the Democrats, who is not in power in the executive office, not the president, they're not the majority in the Senate or the Congress, why are they, holding special elections that's costing, millions upon millions of dollars to basically stop the federal government from doing their job? Why not work with the Republicans for the will of the people? That's why individuals put them in office. But for whatever reason, they could care less about the people. Okay. Because they're protecting something and they have sold their souls. And I'm being totally honest with you. They have sold their souls. They're soulless. They have no God. And this is why the black church is abandoning the party. They're not flipping to the Republican, because the church has to repent, because the church has sold their soul as well. Because what it is if they give you a few dollars when it comes to grants, if they give you some money or supportive, then you must go out there and be a good, I don't want to mess up I don't want to say the wrong word, but be a good steward for them and be in good grace for them. So literally they give you money to speak for them, because they asked Cory Booker, Hakeem Jeffries, and I get them confused because they both biracial, bald head, and light skin. So I'm talking about Hakeem Jeffrey, the minority speaker. So when they give these guys this money, they have to go out as pawns on a chessboard and do the dirty work, because you have individuals, these evildoers in high places, that we refuse to actually go on record because their credibility will be shot. But they finance elected officials, and these elected officials get out there and they'll say whatever, whether it makes sense or not, just to appease the top. And that sounds a little bit like slavery to me. So this is not a new tactic at all, because if you have to go out and say things that you don't agree with, if you have to go out and do things that you don't agree with, that means you don't have control of yourself. And when I say you don't have control of yourself, it's slavery. And it's crazy that the Democratic Party is the only party that does this, because the Republican Party, they're hook, line, they're, on one accord when it comes to MAGA, Make America Great Again. They're on one accord when it comes to America First. So by any means necessary, let's put an elected official in office and just trust that they understand and they know what they're doing. And to be honest and to be frank with you, I didn't think that, there would be peace in the Middle East. I didn't think that Donald Trump could actually broker a peace deal between, Hamas and Israel and everything that comes with that. I'm looking at the world news, and the world is praising Trump. The world see him as a Messiah type figure. The world see him as, their hero. But here in America, we can't even agree on anything because of the slave masters' power and authority over their elected slaves. And I'm going to start using that term elected slaves because that's what it is. They are elected slaves. And when I say elected slaves, I mean, that they don't speak for themselves. They don't have no power. They have to do what they're told to do, because when I look at Proposition 50, okay, and next week we're going to turn the heat up. So hit that like, hit that notification, hit the subscription, because next week, I'm going to break all of this stuff down and prove these facts, because the American people shall not perish due to the lack of knowledge. Okay. And knowledge is the first gift that God gives us. So we got to be smart. We got to be wise. And one thing that we have in common is common sense. And when you have 10 times to vote to keep the government open or to keep it closed, and you vote to keep it closed, you go with a nay or a no show, and you vote to keep it closed, then you are creating a track record and you're creating an algorithm for the world to see your pattern. And we see their pattern. They just need either 5 or 7 Democrats to support or to vote yay or to vote yes to basically open the government so they can have these conversations. But the Democratic Party somehow wants to blame everybody else because this is their shutdown. This is the Schumer shutdown. He basically voted to keep the government open 13 different times. The last time he did it was in March, but he caught so much slacks from the Marxist communist wing of the Democratic Party. And I'm so ecstatic that these the words are coming out. Communism. Okay, Marxists. These are Marxists. These are communists. Communism leads to Marxism, or socialism leads to Marxism, and Marxism leads to communism. And I stand to be corrected on that. But I know they all work together, because you got the front runner in the city of New York who is a communist. And a communist is a Marxist. So we're going to put them together. He's a communist. And he's not even, I don't even believe he's born in America. So what communism is, they want to, take down our federal government. So this is why the Union went to war with the Democratic Dixiecratic South, because the South wanted to do what? Preserve slavery. So why is it the party right now, that same party that's going against the federal government, that does not want to stop crime, that does not want to stop the murders, that does not want the deportations, and they are motivating and encouraging and funding operations to stop the federal government? That's treasonous. And what they're doing is they are committing career suicide. They're suicidal from a career perspective, because they're doing what they're told. And it seems as though their handlers are tired of them and see what the futures bring. So the slave masters or the financiers are going to sacrifice all of these elected officials that they put their money behind, and then they'll start from scratch. And you will never know who did it. But you got individuals who are, ruining their careers for the sheer fact that they got elected. And it's sad. Okay. And it's a black man telling you that. I'm a nonpartisan independent. There's no way I could associate with the party that has no God. Okay. Because the God I serve said I created male and female. We're going to leave that right there. I can't associate with the party that enslaved my ancestors. I can't be supportive of a party that decided to separate from the Union because they wanted to preserve slavery. I can't associate with a party that, since they lost, created the KKK, and now we are here today. Now, we have to, as human beings, like literally, rise above the nonsense. And this is why I just chose to, have a conversation and not, do the videos. And, I really want to have a conversation because, we're not going to be their collateral damage, and we're not going to participate in their hate mongering, race baiting, and all the things that they do. And did you know over this coming weekend, there's supposed to be no Kings rallies all over the nation. And I thought to myself, no Kings rallies all over the nation. I'm here in Los Angeles. We got the Taste of Soul going on this weekend. Okay. I'm a football guy. We got football going on all weekend. I love my weekends. So you got individuals who are going to sacrifice their weekends, and they might be furloughed, I don't know, to basically have a no Kings rally when America has a president. It should be called no president's rallies because Donald Trump has never said that he is a king. Donald Trump has never said that he is a dictator. These are the talking points that these elected slaves have to push and peddle because their slave masters benefit from, this rhetoric. Because if we came together, there'll be a few families that will, not be as prominent as they are today, tomorrow. If we were to come together, there'll be some exposing of some secret societies and individuals. But what they're doing is every day that they do what they do, they're giving the president more power because not only did he cut a deal in the Middle East, and not only did he end 7 wars, this is the 8th one. Not only is he the front runner for a Nobel Peace Prize coming up the next time around, because nobody has done what he has done. What they're doing is they're giving the president power. So now you got people in the Middle East praising Trump. I seen a lady with an Israel flag, by the federal building on Santa Monica Boulevard, in Beverly Hills. And she had the flag, and the announcement came out that the war is over. And Trump, went out there and signed the paperwork. She raised her hands, and I thought she was going to say, "Thank you, God." She had an Israel flag. I thought she was going to say, "Thank you, God." I looked at her and she said, "Thank you, Donald Trump." I said, wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. And he can't even get no love in the country that he's the president of the United States. And that's so strange to me. That is so strange to me. And so now that the world stage is seeing how powerful this president is, now that the world stage is praising the president of the United States, I saw a press conference where Netanyahu said about Trump, he said, Trump is the greatest president of the 51st state of Israel. So they pretty much claiming to be the 51st state of the United States abroad. And I heard him, look it up. He said, "I'd like to thank Donald Trump for being the greatest president of the 51st state of Israel." And I sat back and I said, wow, why can't we be celebrating? Why can't we be kumbaya and loving and enjoying life? Why do we have to pick a side? Why do we have to fight and hate one another? Why do we have to look at, people getting assassinated and trying to get assassinated and tearing down character and fighting? Why can't we all just get along? What my brother Rodney King would say, rest in peace. This is crazy. So if Trump is getting all that love from the world, and then now, since the Democrats, and like I said, I'm not a paid gun. I'm not paid to sway. I got to tell you the truth. Now that the Democrats, have the government shut down for the past 16 days and voted 10 times to keep the government closed, no matter what they say, that energy that's globally, that they're saying, praising Trump globally, for peace in the Middle East. And there's going to be a lot of investments out there as well. So just follow the money. But my point in saying this is, if these individuals are praising Trump abroad, And then the Democratic Party, Schumer shutdown, has shut down the government, and you got 900,000 federal workers furloughed. And then you got the military and other government agencies that's not getting paid. You giving Trump power because he just went on record within the last 48 hours and said that the military is going to get their checks. And everybody got paid yesterday, which was Wednesday. You don't think that there's a American citizen or a military or a federal worker or government official that needed that paycheck? And maybe they didn't even like Donald Trump, but somehow, some way, when the government shut down, the power goes to the executive office. And now that Trump is paying the bills of Americans, and if they continue every day that the Democrats continue to, the Schumer shutdown, they're giving the president more power because they're putting a list together. They're putting a list together to see what they can actually do to checkmate the Democratic Party. And I mean that because I've been saying this for a very long time, that the Democratic Party is dead. The black man, did not show up at the polls and select, Harris to be president. 13 million registered Democrats stood down in the presidential election and either voted down ballot or wrote in, their own candidate. And I love to go on record and say I couldn't choose between Lucifer and Satan. I couldn't choose between lesser of the two evils. And I wrote in my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And this is why I can do what I do today with a smile on my face and not even feel anything, because if I voted for her, I would feel like a hypocrite. If I voted for her, I would have committed career suicide when it comes from a platform or a podcasting perspective, because there's a whole lot of individuals who was with her. Pages got struck down. They don't have the motivation. They went up the wrong rabbit hole. And now if they come out and say something, their credibility will be shot. And that's real. So every day that the government is shut down, the more power that they give the president. And I want you guys to get this. When the government is shut down, the executive branch consumes the power. Okay, the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court, okay, which is the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, and the legislative branch is closed. So that legislation moves up to the executive branch, which is the president. And I watch these guys. I watch these guys, and I watch the president basically say that we're compiling a list right now of ways, since the government is closed, of basically, he didn't use the word checkmate, but he used the word, of making sure that the Democratic Party does not exist. And if you did not know, there was a Federalist Party, there was the Whig Party, these parties expired. So the Democratic Party has an expiration date, and it's going to be over, by the end of this year. So is that what Project 2025 was all about? Because since they dropped the mantle, the working class led by Black Americans are going to pick up the mantle, and we're going to start Project 2026, because we know whichever group has, the black race, not the African Americans, but the black race will win. And I say this because the Union could not or would not have defeated the Democratic, Dixiecratic Confederate South without the president signing the Emancipation Proclamation. And I'm speaking of Abraham Lincoln, and allowing the newly freed slaves to enlist in the Union Army. And they created what we call the Black Regiments and the Buffalo Soldiers. And within 6 months of doing so, the war was over. And if it was not for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, okay, then this world would be a different place. Because once Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, they took the Freedmen's Bank, which is the Freedmen's Bureau, which was the banking system to disseminate, money to the newly freed slaves for buying houses, investments, and things of that nature. They named Otis Howard, who was a general, in the Union Army as the commissioner, and he went on and founded Howard University. But then the federal troops left the South. The federal troops left the South and left the black man hanging. So slavery is not legal, but the black man stuck in the South and being tormented by Antifa, tormented by the KKK, tormented by the white supremacy and the black codes, decided to be sharecroppers and just work with massa. Okay. And just to have some peace. Okay. And the federal troops left the South, and they was able to do that all the way into the civil rights era. And then when the civil rights era came, what happened? The Democrats wanted to rebrand themselves. So we go and fast forward to 1964, after the assassination of the Democratic president, JFK, who was really going to change the game. You see how the assassin's bullet continues to change the trajectory of America, but somehow it benefits the party of slavery. It benefits the party of Jim Crow. It benefits the party of mass incarceration. You see the pattern? And then this presidential season, CNN can't stand Trump. But for some strange reason, CNN had the rally for Donald Trump, in Pennsylvania live because they knew something. But for the sake of God Almighty, I can't give nobody credit other than that. Trump turned his head and they missed because they wanted us to see, what happened to Charlie Kirk, happened to Trump. And just imagine if they was to assassinate their political enemy and somehow Harris would have been the front runner. And I guarantee you, they know they got the button and they got the switch. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, they would have turned that temperature down so low that we would have been coming together and kumbaya, and then Republicans would have voted for Harris, and Harris would have won by a landslide. And then there would be another 100 years of demonic rule. And when I say demonic rule, the Democratic Party is the party of the devil. Okay. And if you are a Democratic member and you are a party of Satan and you associate with that party, hey, I'm giving you a lifeline. Leave now. Leave now. I'm giving you a lifeline. Just let it go. Okay. Because Dr. King, MLK, was assassinated, but he was perfectly fine when he was, nonviolence and all of that. But since the Civil Rights Acts and the Voting Rights Acts passed and the 90th Congress refused to pass meaningful legislation, he decided to step out on faith and do his own thing and create what we call the Poor People's Campaign, because Dr. King was lobbying for $20 billion a year for the next 10 years to end poverty for the Negro and the poor whites. But that assassin's bullet is cold, just like Malcolm X assassinated. Okay. And then Bobby Kennedy, he won the primary in California, and he just went through a back room in the kitchen. They shot him in the stomach and killed him. Why? Who did this? Now, look at the pattern. Look at the algorithm that they created. So look at how they killed Charlie Kirk. They tried to blow Trump's head off. They can't beat their enemies because why? Because they like to hide and, behind doors, and we don't know who they are. So what they do is they're using their money now to fund and to invest in these Democratic elected officials, and they get them to go out there and do the dirty work. Because how can you, your whole career, try to rise above and be smart and all of this, and then somehow you find yourself in a situation where you can't even show your brilliance. You can't even show, your talent because you're told what to do. And if you don't do it, you're going to be punished. And when I say you're going to be punished, they kill people. They kill you. Okay. And this is why, I can do what I do because I don't know them. Okay. I was wondering why they didn't pick me. I've always wondered why, y'all know I'm the one, why I can't get the meeting. Why y'all not funding my grants? And I realized like, wow, I'm not compromised. But if I was the big old black homosexual and hated Trump, I guarantee you I would have a seat right now, guaranteed. But I love God too much. And this is why I can't select something outside of what I believe in. And this is why it takes me to our founding fathers. It takes me to our founding fathers. They were brilliant. And this is why they wrote the Bill of Rights. They were brilliant of how they framed everything. And then the Democrats come in this modern day and call them the framers. But the way that they're doing it, they're basically making the framers frame American people. What happened to one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all people? What happened? How can we have justice for all when America has a debt that it hasn't settled? How? Hi. Somebody said, say hi in the comments. So how is that possible? How is that possible? Because there's no way America can get on its right axle or correct itself without fixing the past. And we got solutions and resolutions. And this is why I created a Better Black America TV, where we seek solutions and resolutions to create a better world. Because if we had a better Black America, meaning crime will drop down drastically. If we had a better Black America, poverty will drop drastically. And then the white individuals who are in the lower classes that have issues with Republicans because they're not wealthy or they're not in their tax bracket, they will come up as well. Then we can have these conversations. But that promissory note that America has continued to be defaulted on is crazy. And what they're doing is giving the power to Trump. And without shadow of a doubt, Trump knows what's going on. And he don't have any black people in his cabinet but one. And just to show you the irony of that, because a lot of people say, oh, they didn't get any jobs. I mean, listen, any black man, that's a congressman or senator or Republican or whatever, you more effective being in your position. You're not effective being in this cabinet, because when you're in the cabinet, you're literally locked in. You locked in. So none of the black men, were even asked to sell out. But we do have one black man, and I can't recall his name, but he is the Secretary of Housing and Development. He's the HUD Secretary. And the irony of that is that they had a cabinet meeting yesterday that I watched, and the only black man in Trump's cabinet prayed before the meeting. And Trump looked at him, and that was a powerful prayer. That was powerful. And I'm sitting back like, man, and it just takes me, like I said, the word is real, because God said, if you could find me one righteous one, I won't smite the city. And I guess that's that one token. And I appreciate him for that, because the only black man that Trump has in his cabinet is the urban development, the HUD secretary, but he's also the one that prays before the meetings. And I saw that with my own eyes. So now that the Democrats are abandoning their job and they want to point the finger and blame everybody else and rely on your lack of intelligence, rely on your ignorance to basically accept what they're telling you. I say challenge everything, because right is right, is wrong. Okay, you can't debate the truth. The truth is not debatable. The truth is factual. Only thing that's debatable is lies. So anybody that wants to have a debate, they want to prove to the world that they are a better liar than you, or prove to the world that they are a better liar and have more charisma or style. Okay. But in the sense of the truth, it is what it is. Would you argue with anybody 2 + 2 = 4? Would you argue and debate somebody about that? But somebody will argue and debate you and have you confused as 2 + 2 4. Just like, when the world being flat went viral, you had NBA players and Steph Curry and them talking about the world was flat, and it went viral. And I'm sitting back saying, man, they just playing to the lowest of the lowest vibration. They playing on these people's ignorance. So we're going to stick to the truth, and the truth shall make us free. So as long as we keep on telling the truth and having these conversations, the more we're going to open our eyes, and the closer we're going to get to America being who she is. The MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, is winning right now. President Trump is doing so much right now. And like I said, I'm not, with MAGA, but I understand. But I do believe in Make America Great, because America is the greatest nation. And to prove that fact in modern times, to prove that fact right now, that peace deal in the Middle East literally solidified that there will not be, at least in the present, World War III. Think about that. And the Bible says that God will use a fool to confound the wise. So I guess Trump is a fool in this equation, and the wise is looking real stupid right now. Because the more this shutdown, the more power you give Trump. Because what you're going to do is, it's a process of elimination, Democrats. And this is a message to the Democrats. It's a process of elimination. So since you guys are abandoning post, since you guys have voted for the 10th time to keep the government closed, and then go on record and have press conferences and act like any individual with a sound mind is going to have a conversation with you when the government's closed, is asinine and stupid. So long as you continue to do that, you're sacrificing your careers. You're creating, a ecosystem that can actually function without you, because the American people are going to have this conversation with this president. Trump's been having conversations with South African leaders, Congo, Somalia, the Israelis and all of that. Why can't the regular American citizens have a conversation? And as a black man and as a leader, in the black coalition, and as an associate with the FBAs, the fundamental black Americans, meaning the Americans here, not the diaspora of all black people, the American ancestors that's here, we need to have this conversation. And that's the worst thing that can ever happen to the Democrats, because what they'll realize is that, maybe our elected officials not as smart as we thought they were, even though they went to, Harvard and Yale and all the Ivy League schools, even though they're Freemasons and, part of the Divine Nine and all of that. These individuals are smart. So once they get a load of us and we have these conversations of solutions and resolutions, you guys are going to be non-existent, because first thing that I'm going to say when I sit down and have a conversation with the president, I'm going to say, good job. And can you send the federal and National Guard to South Central LA? And I got 2 or 3 spots where you can actually, make their base and load them up. Because I would love to drive a Humvee around the hood and tell these little YNs to get their black asses in the house. Real talk. It's murders going on, killings going on in South Los Angeles that we don't hear nothing about. We can use the help, but they could care less about us, but we care about us. So we got to have that conversation, because, contrary to popular belief, going against the federal government, that's not cool and it's not right. But just the presence of the federal government will change the game. And ICE is hiring, and they're adding a $50,000 signing bonus if you lateral in from another law enforcement agency. Yes, ICE is hiring. Thank you for that. And if you lateral from another law enforcement agency, they're offering a $50,000 signing bonus. So before you even start training, you get 50 racks. And it is what it is. So when I say that the federal troops do make a difference, because I have a little experience with that. Because in 1992, with Rodney King and all of that, we tore this city up, and I still say to this day, that was one of the best 2 or 3 days of my life, other than my 2 children being born. And it was fun. Okay. And to keep a long story short, on that 3rd day, when we went out to, where we going to go and load up the trucks and go get some goods and go break in some stuff, where we going to go? And we're coming up northbound on Western Avenue, headed towards Imperial, because my people, from the Harvest in 126th Street down there by Chester Washington Golf Course, and we're coming up the hill. We was in JUCO, junior college at the time, and we go up the hill, and I look to the left, and right now Food for Less is there, and at that time it was Kmart. And when I looked to the left, that was a Army base. It turned into a base for the federal troops. And when I looked to the left, I'm like, wow, they setting up shop. And I'm saying, okay, well, we got a little more time, and it kind of made us nervous. And we looked to the side and we kept going. We got to 108, looked up, seeing federal troops and federal officers standing on the rooftops with AKs and all of that. Man, we busted you, and party was over. So I know the effect. I know the effect of federal troops being in an urban city, and it has to stop. It is what it is. So now, since the Democrats are relinquishing their power, okay, they're throwing in the towel. They just want a grand finale on their exit, because their slave masters, I truly believe when I say slave masters, meaning their financiers or the individuals that finance their campaigns, are literally forcing them to walk off the cliff. Okay. Because anybody with a sound mind, will look at the condition of the American people and say, you know what, this is not right. And I'm sure that Chuck Schumer and 4 other Democrats, could get on board and open up the government so everybody could get paid. But the 900,000 that's been furloughed, and Trump's paying the federal troops, and there's other agencies that he's paying, and he's paying these individuals. Are you ready for where the money's coming from? The revenue of the tariffs. The revenue of the tariffs is paying the bills of American citizens right now. And we need to shut this thing down, because the money that was found in the Doge, okay, that money, that money should be earmarked for something else, because once the Democrats get out the way, they're going to open the door for grants. They're going to open the door for opportunities, investments, things like that. So this is how the American people will raise the bar and, have an inheritance for their children's children. It is what it is. It is what it is. And Robert Brown said Doge there was no Doge money. No. The Doge money, Robert, is the stopping of the USAID. The Doge money is stopping, the aid to the Department of Education, stopping, the Social Security, that was going to individuals that's 300 years old. So there is a large volume of money and subsidies that's there earmarked for something special. And we don't know what it is, but if we just sit back and let this thing play out, it is what it is. And Elon is the richest man in the world. He don't have to steal a thing. Okay. So now that we understand that separating ourselves from the Democratic Party, the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow, the party of the KKK, the party of mass incarceration, since we separating ourselves, but we're not aligning ourselves as Republicans, we're aligning ourselves as we the people. We the people. That's what the Constitution says. If the Constitution was not real, then one thing they should not have put on the letter as the letterhead is we. So we the people, the citizens of America, we have to come together and demand what we're going to demand. And that's, righteousness, really. But we don't want to associate ourselves with the Republicans, because of their history as well. Because when I continue to read my Bible, I realize that, Jesus flipped the table on the scribes and the Pharisees. Both of them was uncomfortable, but at least he associated himself with the Pharisees. And that's the story of when he went into the Pharisees' home and he was dirty, and a female in the house, I believe it was Mary Magnus, and she washed his feet. Okay. And put some, gave me some perfume and had him smelling good and all of that. So it is what it is. So now that the Democratic Party is expiring, now that the Democratic Party is null and void, and I'm sitting here with Robert, another hypocrite. Go ahead and expound on that. I'm in the comments today. I'm just talking about the 16-day government shutdown, as well as, vote no on Proposition 50. Okay, because what Proposition 50 does, and I'm from California, I could care less about what they're doing in Texas, but we already have an independent body, that we already voted and selected to have independent individuals, nonpartisan independents, draw our lines. So we have a special election. We have a special election coming up, and they're spending, hundreds of millions of dollars to pass one bill, one legislation, and that's to vote. They want us to vote yes on Prop 50. And what Prop 50 does is it puts the power of the entire state, freedom or die. I'm talking to you. It puts the power, and Hakeem Jeffries made it clear, into extremist hands, into one, two, no more than 3 individuals get an opportunity to map out the maps and take all the power away from the citizens of California. That's not right. That is not right. And Texas is Texas. So why are we trying to stop Trump? Trump is doing his thing. Trump is a rock star. Trump is doing things on a level that no one can even understand. But, we sit back and, not, fall into this, flesh and these human affairs, because my Bible tells me it's not flesh and blood. It's powers, principalities, evildoers in high places. So I can't look at the flesh. I want to know what power, what principality, or what entity is orchestrating this individual to go against everything that they believe in just to make a point. And that's crazy. That's crazy. So it is not flesh and blood. It's powers, principalities, evildoers in high places. And if you focus on flesh and blood, then you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on the wrong thing. And this is why, we have to be on the same sheet of music, because you got individuals out there, and some may be on here today, that's suicidal, that don't even love themselves. They will do anything to make somebody else unhappy because they're not happy. They'll be willing to do anything to ruin somebody's day because they don't even like who they are. And this is what we call human error. So one of the rudiments, or one of the main things that I personally, and I can help you with this, how I, could stand up and be, a man with high standards and, have a high moral turpitude, is because the part of that Bible, when it says love God with your heart, mind, and your soul, secondly, love your neighbors, you love yourself. So if I love my neighbors, I love myself. Before I could even think about my neighbor, I got to make sure I love me. I got to make sure I do what I'm supposed to do. I got to make sure that I'm on point. I got to make sure that I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not, spewing out, anything that will, make a situation or a circumstance for somebody else. But a lot of people don't understand that, because when you don't believe in God, and when you break all these rudiments and all these principles, when you, do all the sins, I can understand why you hate yourself. Because if you loved yourself, There's no way anybody could get you to hate somebody else. Just like these ads out there. It's an ad out there, of an individual. He looks obese. They just showed the back of his head. He's mad. He's in the dark. His home is junky and dirty. And there's Trump's on TV. He's throwing things at the TV and he's mad and he's raging and he's hitting the table. And then the ad say, boom, if you want to stop Trump, vote yes on Prop 50. It's not about stopping Trump. It's about stopping the devil. It's about stopping the devil. That's what it's all about. Stopping the devil. So I'm throwing a lifeline to you today. Repent, because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And I remember a time where they would say, what would Jesus do? What did he do? What did he do in his time of existence, in his word, in red? He said, I didn't come to change the scribe or the Pharisee. So our job is not to change the Republicans or the Democrat. Our job is to fulfill the will of God, meaning, be righteous, because I've never seen a righteous man or woman forsaken. And I've never seen a righteous man or woman's seed beggeth bread. Okay. So this is why we wonder why we go through so much in life. This is why we wonder, why I'm not where I'm supposed to be, because you're focused on the wrong thing. Look in that mirror like we all do every day. Look in that mirror and do what's right, because right is going to get you into the kingdom, and right is going to have your soul, no matter what the situation, circumstance is, you're going to be happy, So an individual could say, hey, I hate Trump. Okay, well, then you hate yourself. So, freedom or die, maybe that's a bot. You hate yourself, because there's no way I can hate anybody because I love myself. And there's no way I could get a white man, a white woman, a homosexual, a lesbian, or anything else to get me to hate another human being. No way. No way. So if you hate Trump, you hate yourself, because Trump is nothing but a man. And that man happened to be the president of the United States. And that man is doing his job. And my question is, what are you doing? What are you doing? He's doing his job. Let's do ours. And right now I'm doing my job, because my job is to motivate your spirit, to step your game up, and to deliver yourself from the burning house of that Democratic Party. It's no good. They kill people. They blow people's heads off on national television. Their elected officials, spew hate. Their elected officials, lie through their teeth just because they're told to do so, which make them a slave. And Freedom or Die said Jesus will definitely not support Trump. I'll tell you that. Well, I'm going to tell you he will definitely not support the Democratic Party as well, because in the book of Matthew, it says he didn't come to change the scribe of the Pharisees. And the Pharisees is conservative and the scribe is a liberal. He gave us a place. So where do you stand? Where do you stand? Okay. But God gives grace to us all. Because I believe when Trump turned his head and that bullet missed, that was for us, because that would have been so traumatic. You see how the Charlie Kirk thing was traumatic? That would have been traumatic. And an individual who almost got his head blown off, if he did not believe in a God, I'm sure he believes in him now. And when I see him call up the only black man in his cabinet, the director or the secretary of HUD, to pray, and that man walks up into that cabinet with a table full of all Trump's cabinet people, puts his hands on the president's shoulders, and they bow their head and pray, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I beg to differ. God loves us all. He loves us all. But his word says there's goats and there's sheeps. Are you a goat or are you a sheep? It is what it is. And the Dixie Rats, the Democrats, the Democratic Party, the party that has no God. The entire party has no God, because what was it? Freedom or die, freedom or die. Do you know the Democratic Party, has sections in his party that don't even believe in no God? The atheist party, atheists, okay, devil worshiper, Satanists, okay, LBGTQ, LMNOPs. Think about that. That party has no God. And this is why the black church is literally diminishing because of its association with any political party. Because if Jesus didn't come to change the scribe and Pharisees, then why is the church getting involved? That should be a safe haven and a sacred place for individuals to, go get their solitude, to get their spirit stronger. But then you got individuals, in the church compromised, and they are going to die in the wilderness. And that happens to be our baby boomers. They're going to die in the wilderness. Okay. But Generation X, my generation, which is an unknown factor, and that unknown mathematical factor, that X, is going to equal freedom and liberation, because the curse is over. And before I close, did you know in the book of Genesis, it says the children of Abraham will be stolen from their land and dwell in a foreign land and be casted as slaves and duly oppressed for 400 years. And it says, after that, I, God, will punish the oppressors, and they shall come out with great wealth. Why are we still with the oppressors? And then it says in Acts 7:6, if you want them to know, put it in the first part of the Bible and then the first part of the New Testament. Acts 7:6 says the same thing verbatim. The children of Abraham will be stolen from their land and dwell in a foreign land and be casted as slaves and duly oppressed for 400 years. After that, I, God, will punish the oppressors, and my people shall come out with great wealth. And right now, we are witnessing the punishment and the dismantlement of the Democratic Party. And with that being said, man, I love y'all. Hit that notification, hit that like. It is what it is, because next week we coming with the receipts. And if this government is still shut down, man, that's literally good news, because the more that they sit back, the more that they empower the president, the more that they get out the way, and we the people can actually stand up. It is what it is. And you guys have an amazing day. God bless you. And this is your man Bushawn Glover signing out. Peace out.